I'm just very interested in is like, how do we start the process of beginning to be a more positive, aware society? Or are we going to basically, go the other way and actually lead to another mass extinction event? Or I'm just very interested in your thoughts on that.
I think the first thing to accept is that both paths are possible, that nothing is guaranteed, and that what we do individually and collectively will decide which of those two paths we go down. The other thing I think is that breakdown, collapse, and transformation actually happen at the same time. Okay. So yes, we are witnessing the collapse of sort of Western capitalist extraction-based civilization. And at the same time, we're seeing the emergence of new ways of thinking, new ways of being simultaneously. So how can we steer our individual and collective destiny towards a future that we want, as opposed to collapse into a mass extinction or another dark age? So there's tons of things that we could talk about, but I'm going to stick to just 3 individual things that I think we can do, and 3 collective things about how we structure our societies. So individually, the first, and I'd say most important thing, is to become more conscious. So if that's through yoga, if that's through time spent in nature, if it's through Sufism, if it's through meditation, it could be through art or whatever it is that you do that makes you feel more conscious, more alive, more free. Do that, and it requires practice and it requires dedication, as I know that you guys know. I try and meditate every day, and I don't always meditate every day, but the more I do, the more adaptable and free I become, and therefore a better servant of evolution. The second thing is tied to it. It's still sort of individual development, but it's really about our worldview or our values or our sort of cultural code. So broadly speaking, our worldviews or values have evolved through a series of discernible stages. So our grandparents would have had very traditional values. They would have, valued duty and self-restraint and service of your nation, service to the king, religion. These would have been values that would have been widely held in that time. And then, the sort of baby boomer generation, also our parents' generation, was rational, modern, secular. So it's a slightly different set of values. And then, the young people today tend to have postmodern values. So they're much more concerned with environmental values or LGBTQ plus rights. They're much more progressive, or indigenous wisdom. And that's that postmodern value system. Like all the others, has its good sides and bad sides, its light and its dark. And essentially, we need to try and keep that kind of escalator going. So we need to have as many people to evolve to, the modern and the postmodern stages, and beyond that, to what's sometimes called metamodernism or integral worldview, which is much more holistic, much more inclusive. And basically has the ability to see that whole ladder for what it is, and to integrate the best that all those worldviews have to offer and slough off the worst. And that is connected to how conscious you are, but they're very separate things. So, for example, you can have an enlightened Buddhist monk who's also a little bit homophobic, right? It's confusing, but it's true. So he might be very, very conscious, but his cultural worldview, if he's grown up in rural Nepal, might not be super woke and postmodern, right? And conversely, you can have someone who's very culturally evolved, who's super woke and uses all the correct gender pronouns, etc., but is not very conscious or self-aware. And so they're 2 separate lines of development, and we need them both. So both of those things are two ways that we can develop individually. And the third thing is just generally in our choices in our life, I think we need to live as if we are a cell in the body of humanity. So, because that's essentially where this is all going, is that we are giving birth to a kind of global organism. And that might sound very far-fetched, but it's nothing more than an extrapolation of what evolution has done all the way through our evolutionary history. So, you are a galaxy of 1 trillion cells that are all cooperating with one another. And the cells aren't necessarily aware of your whole body, one of your cells. They have a degree of autonomy. I can take one of your cells out and put it in a petri dish, and it can even grow and flourish. So what we're trying to do is replicate that structure at the global level. And so if we go around as individuals thinking about me and what's good for me all the time, and fuck the planet or fuck the rest of society or other people on the other side of the world, and we have no thought for the well-being of the whole, then we are behaving like a cancerous cell. And that's what we see on a large scale, is that the human body is sick because not enough cells are living with the whole in mind. And so none of this stuff is easy, but that involves trying not to eat too much meat or red meat, not flying to the other side of the world regularly, trying to donate to charity, trying to be community minded, trying to help out people when they can, all these things that, again, are no paragon of virtue in any of this stuff, but or the more that we can live holistically and live with the welfare of the whole planet in mind, then the more likely we are to survive as a species, in fact. So those are 3 things we can do individually. Collectively, the first thing we need to do is we need to have some form of global cooperation. So at the moment, we have nations that are pursuing their own self-interest at the expense of the planet, or big corporations that are pursuing their self-interest at the expense of the planet, and there's no supranational structure to rein them in, to make sure that we're not polluting too much, or that we're not avoiding tax, or to make sure nations nuclear disarm, or any of these issues which need supranational governance in order to restrain destructive competition. So we need some form of global cooperation that actually works, and again, that will replicate the structure of our bodies. Your brain is not a top-down dictator. It's in a holistic relationship with the cells in your body and with the oxygen that goes to it from your lungs and the respiration from your cells. So we need to kind of replicate that structure, but we need to have some kind of global decision making. Some decisions need to be made at the global level politically. The second thing I think we need to do is to change the monetary system. And again, that's very complicated, but the money is essentially a system of incentives which motivates human behavior. So if I have lots of money, I can command a lot of resources and human time. And essentially our monetary system is broken, and it's incentivizing the wrong kinds of behaviors. So for example, if you think of a tract of rainforest that we're trying to preserve, if I go to the bank and I say, I'd like to take out a loan of $1 million and buy the rainforest and preserve it, the banker will say, how will you pay the interest on that loan? And so you won't get the loan. But man number 2 comes along and says, hello, I'm going to take out a loan of $1 million plus a bit more, and I'm going to buy the rainforest, and then I'm going to log it, and I'm going to pay you 2% a year or 3% a year. So that second person gets the loan. So just by the nature of issuing money with debt and interest, we actually incentivize extractive behaviors, or we incentivize behaviors that multiply money on money returns. And the second person gets money with which he can command human time and resources. The first person doesn't. And so that's just one example of how our monetary system is incentivizing the wrong kinds of behaviors, extractive behaviors that require endless growth in order to sustain them. And that's out of whack. And if we can change that, then hopefully we can incentivize behaviors that we individually, collectively value a lot more. So that'll allow them to see what they find meaningful more often, without having this difficult choice between either I do something that makes a lot of money or I do something that is according to my values. They shouldn't have to be in conflict, those two things. And if we design the monetary system differently, I think we can bring them together.
I mean, I know we've into the money system, but there's a plug here for positive money. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a really interesting concept, and I think people should check positive money out on this strand of financial systems. Yeah,
love positive money. I tried to work for them a few times, but yeah, so all that, and then just to finish off, the third thing is just, again, I could have picked lots of things, but another third thing that we need to get right in terms of our civilization is freedom of information. So in your body, none of your cells or organ systems are withholding information from other cells or organ systems in your body, because they're all united. They all have the same goal. And in currently, we have companies with intellectual property that are trying to withhold information. So if one team comes up with a vaccine, they might want to withhold information from the other companies so that they can make more money. Or for example, even like technology companies or like smartphones, like we do not have access to the best technology that money can buy currently, because all the intellectual property is held in different companies who are all competing with one another, and they're withholding information. And so this applies across all contexts, all research, all all knowledge. The idea of intellectual property, that I can come up with an idea that I own and that I can benefit from that, but nobody else can. That is I think a really broken idea, and it may have worked in a kind of growth-based, capitalist system where it was all about competition. But if we're going to move to a kind of global organism where we're collaborating, if we free up information and information can travel freely, then we basically we can all benefit from that collectively. So that's just my pet sort of idea for civilization design. But there's lots more.